It is officially game week for Kirby Smart and the #1 ranked Georgia Bulldogs as they take on Dabo Swinney and the Clemson Tigers in Atlanta in just 6 days to kick off the 2024 season. This is a massive, massive game for the Dogs, but I think this is an even bigger game and a more important game for Dabo Swinney and the Clemson Tigers for a lot of reasons, and I'm going to break that down in this video. But, you know, if you're a young Clemson fan, you're probably watching this video, right? Trying to get some scoop on the Dogs, but all you know is Clemson going out and winning, being one of the best teams in college football, probably making the college football playoff. And yes, they have 2 recent national championships, but the last 3 years, things are kind of going a little bit downhill. They went 9-4 last year. That is unacceptable for the Clemson fan base right now. In 2022, 11-3, 2021, 10-3. They've lost at least 3 games in each of the last 3 seasons. They need things to turn around quickly. And if Dabo Swinney loses to Georgia, it's not the end of the world. But if they get embarrassed by Georgia, I do think, from talking with people around the Clemson program, that the seat might get a little hot, right? They don't mind losing a tough, hard-fought game against the #1 team, #1 program in the country. But if Georgia goes to Atlanta and just lights Clemson up, right? Game's over at the half, just an easy, comfortable win, things are going to get really shaky over in Clemson. And that's when I start to think, right? Could Georgia end Dabo's career? Now, I know that's a crazy kind of statement. It's just week 1 of the season. The Tigers could still have a promising year. If they don't beat Georgia with that schedule they have, I mean, yes, they could still win the ACC and make a deep playoff run. They're going to make the playoffs this year, I would assume, right? It's 12 teams. It would be quite embarrassing if Clemson did not get into the 12-team playoff. They need to make a big run, in my opinion, for Dabo to turn, the hot seat all the way off and still be the guy. This is his 16th season, and he doesn't have a proven quarterback. The offensive line looks like a Mark Richt-looking offensive line back when Georgia was losing 2 to 3 games at least a year, right? They've got some massive question marks, and the last thing Dabo needs is to get run out of Mercedes-Benz Stadium by Kirby Smart and the Dogs. That's a fact. And there are some big-time Clemson boosters who are looking at this game, closely. If they win the game, that'd be crazy. They would obviously accept that, and Dabo Swinney will talk on that microphone forever, right? They might give him a new contract if they beat Georgia. If they lose, it's not the end of the world. But if they get crushed, which some people think might happen, Georgia could run them out of the building. I'm going to talk about that in a second. This could be the start of the end for Dabo Swinney if they get crushed by Georgia in Atlanta. But let's talk about the Tigers real quick and how they match up against the Dogs. Now, Clemson's defense, I think, is really good. Probably a top 10 defense in the country. Their defensive line has a lot of really good players. TJ Parker is phenomenal. DeMonte Caper, Trey Williams, Peter Woods, former 5-star. People expect a lot out of him. They've got Vic Burley coming back. He was the 5-star from Warner Robins. He's healthy now, so the defensive line should be stout. They're still going to have a really tough time dealing with Georgia's massive, experienced offensive line and that run game. So, Clemson's biggest strength, they're going to be going up against one of Georgia's biggest strengths. That's not ideal for them at all. At linebacker, they've got Barrett Carter, a guy I know very well, a guy Georgia recruited, North Gwinnett High School, one of the best linebackers I've covered in the state of Georgia over the last few years. And they've got Sammy Brown, who's a freshman, still needs to learn kind of what to do, but he is a smart player with good instincts who's only going to get better. Game 1 against the Dogs, if Sammy Brown's out there, he could be a liability. In the secondary, R.J. Mickens, really good player. Tyler Venable, smart, reliable player. Khalil Barnes, freshman All-American last year out of North Oconee, right in Georgia's backyard. He went to Clemson and had a great year last year. Avian Terrell, younger brother of A.J. Terrell, superstar cornerback with the Falcons. Shelton Lewis, a kid out of Stockbridge, 3-star that Clemson signed and has turned into a good player. They've got guys defensively. Will Georgia hit the 40-point mark? If they do, that would be very impressive. Very impressive to score 40 on this Clemson Tiger defense. But their biggest weakness, as you probably know by now, is the quarterback and the offensive line. And I don't want to talk about last year because it's a new year. Whatever happened last year doesn't matter. But the last game of last year, they barely squeaked by Kentucky. Kentucky manhandled Clemson's offensive line. And that's just what happened. That Kentucky front seven that did nothing whatsoever against Georgia had a field day against Clemson. And Cade Klubnik is just not the guy. And this goes back to where I think Dabo is, it's not a good look when you go to the playoffs and you win 2 national championships. You did it with generational quarterbacks, and you happen to get them back-to-back, Deshaun Watson, Trevor Lawrence. They get credit for that. Absolutely. They haven't had a decent quarterback come through since. DJ Uiagalelei needs to be out of town. Florida State needs to tell him to pack his bags and get out of there. That was the funniest thing I saw during the offseason. When that guy said he was transferring from Oregon State to Florida State, I marked the Seminoles out. I marked them out. And I'm not surprised they lost to Georgia Tech. That kid stinks. He stinks. Cade Klubnik, he might stink too. I kind of think he does. I think he's a good athlete who can give you 2 to 3 really solid, flashy throws a game. Outside of that, he's inconsistent. He's inaccurate. He can't read a defense. He's another guy who is, I think he's an Ingles brand Bo Nix. He's a guy who's looking at the first route. If it's not there, he's going to try to take off and run. He wants to be the guy, right? He was a 5-star quarterback from Texas, won state titles, big deal, right? Kid's got an ego. He goes to Clemson, struggles a little bit, but he's trying to do too much. I don't think he has the weapons around him that we're used to seeing from Clemson. They don't have any killer wide receivers. No one's scared of Clemson's wide receivers. They've got a couple good running backs, both from the state of Georgia, Phil Moffitt, Keith Adams, one from Grayson, one from Cedartown. The offensive line is going to have their hands full. I think they're going to get crushed by Georgia's front seven. That's what I'm expecting. I don't think Clemson's going to hit the 20-point mark. That's going to be a bad look for the Tigers if they don't get there, and I don't think they're going to. Defensively, they could still play well, still give up 30-plus points, and if Clemson's struggling to score, struggling to move the ball, the game might get out of hand early in the second half. I think we've got a semi-close game at the half. I think Georgia leads. They probably feel good where they're at, but it's not over, right? I think you're looking in the third quarter, Georgia really starts to, I don't want to say dominate, but I can't get the phrase out of my head right now, but impose their will on Clemson in the third quarter. And then in the fourth quarter might be a little bit of a breeze. Georgia has to keep doing their thing, but I think when the fourth quarter runs around, Georgia fans are going to be feeling great, and they can sit back and kind of enjoy a stress-free fourth quarter. That's what I think is going to happen. Close in the first half, Georgia proves that they are the deeper, better coached, more talented team up and down the roster, and that's going to show in the fourth quarter. But if Clemson wins this game, it's because the defense forces multiple turnovers, maybe takes one back to the house, trick plays on offense that throw Georgia off, and maybe that's where they score a touchdown offensively. And they've got to win special teams. They need 1 to 2 big game-changing plays on special teams to keep them in the game or take the lead maybe in the second half. Clemson's not going to go up and down the field on this Georgia defense. It's not going to happen. This kid can't do it. Cade Klubnik is not that guy. He's not good enough to beat Georgia by himself throwing the football. They need to run the ball successfully for 4 quarters, force stops defensively, cause turnovers, and then maybe score a touchdown defensively or on special teams. That's what happened. And Georgia just has to shoot themselves in the foot, which is not something we're used to seeing from a Kirby Smart coach team. They don't go backwards. There are not a ton of self-inflicted wounds, self-inflicted penalties. If Georgia comes out, plays their ball, they're going to win this game. I think they're going to cover. But do they beat Clemson bad enough to where Dabo is starting to be on the hot seat for real? And it gets to a point where, okay, you got crushed by Georgia. We still don't have a quarterback. We're getting beat in the trenches. If they don't win the ACC, which is not great. It's not great. I mean, it's JV. It's a JV. It's junior varsity conference compared to the Big 10, which should be the Big 18 now, the Big 20. We're still calling it the Big 10. I guess we'll just call it like that forever. And the SEC, okay? So if they can't even win the ACC this year and they get crushed by Georgia, the Clemson boosters are going to have conversations. And if they do, and Dabo Swinney is no longer the coach next year or in 2 years, there's a chance we look back at this game in Atlanta coming up in 6 days and say, that's where it started. Maybe it's already started. I don't think so. I think most of the Clemson fan base, they're okay with Dabo. They're not winning another national championship with Dabo Swinney. That's not even a hot take at all. That's a pretty cold take. It's not going to happen. And if the goal is to win national championship, what are we doing? Mark Richt was winning 10 games a year. Wasn't enough. Now the program was on the downslide, but the Clemson program right now is on the downslide. How many years will those 2 national championships that he won with generational quarterbacks, how much longer will that be okay? Yeah, Clemson, maybe they're not great this year, but hey, he won 2 titles. And the next year, yeah, they're not as great, but hey, remember he won 2 titles. You're going to have to stop talking about that eventually if you're a Clemson booster. We'll see. This is a big, big game for the Clemson Tigers and Dabo Swinney. If you win, everything's great again. You jump on the microphone, you be all yabba dabba Dabo, everything's great. If you lose, you're still okay. If you get crushed and lose by 20 plus points, 30 plus points, this could be the beginning of the end for Dabo Swinney and the Clemson Tigers. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. It's game week. Make sure you're on Dog Post for all the latest and greatest news. We're going to be pumping out content all week long. We want you to be there to read it. So make sure you're heading over to Dog Post to read everything we have coming for this upcoming week. Thanks for watching. I'll see you on the website.